Hello and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I have some breaking news coming out here for you. We're going to be talking about Emmanuel Macron here in this video again. This is the French president, and I've talked about him quite a bit over the last month because French President Emmanuel Macron has really come out swinging here in terms of this war here with Ukraine. And he stated many times that they'd be unwilling to rule out troops to Ukraine, that they'd be willing to send their own French troops to Ukraine to back them. And many times he said as well that if Ukraine starts to fall, they would send troops into Ukraine to fight against Russia if need be. So they're not willing to rule out any options here in terms of support for Ukraine. So I've got some news now that he's coming out weighing 5 options for sending troops to Ukraine. So he's got 5 ideas on how they can support Ukraine. And obviously, one of them is literally fighting Russia, okay? Declaring war against Russia and committing to trench warfare using French troops. So I've got some information to go over here with you. And this is on Yahoo News, okay? I want to show you this article. Macron weighs 5 scenarios for NATO troop deployment in Ukraine. And it says here, French President Emmanuel Macron is considering 5 scenarios for sending troops to Ukraine. The French newspaper Le Figaro reported on March 26th. In the first scenario, France could set up a weapon production and maintenance factories. However, the issue is that insurance companies may levy hefty bills for construction, rendering the scenario unlikely. So their first scenario, they'd want to set up weapon production and maintenance factories. So I'm assuming weapons productions like maybe for bombs, who knows, missiles, drones, whatever it might be, which I do know already. They already have drone factories inside of Ukraine, but they're considering getting more involved here by building weapons productions facilities here, and then also maintenance, which I would assume would be maybe for like tanks or vehicles, whatever other types of weaponry they may have there they need to maintain. It says here in a second scenario, France would train Ukrainian troops and participate in demining. Ukrainian soldiers are already undergoing training in France and Poland with the French army, and the same would occur on Ukrainian territory under this scenario, making it the most realistic. So they're saying here this is the most realistic scenario, with France getting involved, would be them training troops inside of Ukraine, which we do know that multiple countries, I know the U.S., I believe, has been training some troops as well. Some Ukrainian troops, and then the UK and France have been doing so also. And they're talking about potentially training them on the ground in Ukraine, so that would require them to put boots on the ground. So the third scenario involves protecting Odessa, which is in the southern side of Ukraine. Macron fears that the war would spill over into Moldova if Russia occupies the Odessa port, Le Monde said. While possible, such an option poses certain risks for France. So they're talking about Moldova here, potentially protecting Moldova. And also there's that breakaway region, the Transnistria region inside of Moldova, that was recently calling for Russia to come and protect them. So should Russia try to move on the southern side of Ukraine and try to take Odessa next, that would make it easier, create like somewhat of a land bridge for them to get to Moldova. So that's probably what they're worried about there. And then it would obviously disrupt things with Moldova. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Moldova is a NATO member. I believe so. In the fourth scenario, French troops would establish buffer zones in Ukraine to aid Ukrainian soldiers. It is not excluded that they will end up in liberated areas, for example, on the Belarusian border in Kherson or Kharkiv, said Nicholas Tenzer, a Sciences Po Paris University lecturer. So they're talking about buffer zones here again, and Putin was just talking about this the other day about creating buffer zones, but it's a little bit different of a zone. I think what they're trying to do with Russia. Russia's trying to push, the enemy back, which should be the West and Ukraine, away from the border of Russia, so that way these long-range drones can't target inside of Russia, which they've been doing a lot of that lately. So they're talking here about putting troops on the Belarusian border. I'm going to show you something about this in a minute too. And then Kherson is down in the south, and Kharkiv is up in the northeast, okay, closer to Russia. So they're talking about setting up buffer zones here on the fourth scenario. Fifth scenario, deemed the least realistic by journalists, involves a direct participation of French troops in trench warfare. Participation of French troops in combat against the Russian army would be equivalent to declaring war on Russia, the publication said. So this scenario, I think, would definitely be probably one of the last scenarios. And I think they're just considering this idea because it may come down to it. Who knows? Um, but obviously, yes, this would be a declaration of war on Russia if they were to do this. That would be trench warfare for them. So I think that would be one of their last resort options if all other options were to fail. So obviously, all these options are basically to support Ukraine. They're basically all support roles in the beginning, and then if the support roles fail, that's when they're saying they would basically step in with troops on the ground fighting directly against Russia to keep them back. Okay, so I also want to show you this. This is on the new Voice of Ukraine. It says here, Macron considers two options for sending troops to Ukraine. So I think this might kind of tie into that a little bit with the last, article that we just showed you. But I want to show you this too. French President Emmanuel Macron is considering two options for sending troops to Ukraine, one of which is to send a military contingent to the border of Belarus. So here it's talking about this as well. European Solidarity Party Deputy Oleksiy Honcharenko wrote on Telegram on March 20th. The move would help free up Ukrainian troops in the area, allowing them to reinforce the eastern and southern parts of Ukraine. So I'm going to show you that on a map so we can see what they're talking about here. Honcharenko, who chairs the Migration and Refugees Committee of the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly, received this information from his French colleagues during the committee's meeting on March 20th. So this was just like a week ago when they got this information that Macron was considering sending troops to the Belarusian border. So I want to show you that right now because I think that's pretty interesting news here when it comes to France. So let's take a look at this on a map, okay? So some of their objectives here where they want to support Ukraine, okay? So here's Belarus, right? And look at the giant Belarusian border. So at the very beginning of the war, I remember when this first got started, there was lots of troops, Ukrainian troops being sent up here to the northern border where Belarus is at, because there was fears that Belarus would get involved here and start invading Ukraine as well, and there was going to be like a two front war basically, because most of the fighting is happening over here on the eastern side and the southern and eastern side of Ukraine right now, right? So their weak points here are obviously down here in the south, because I believe Kherson is taken. I might be wrong about that, but a lot of this region down here, especially Mariupol, has been taken by Russia. They control a lot of the land down here. So if they were to make their way over to Odessa, it'd be right next to Moldova here, which also this small section over here of Moldova on the eastern, I think it's eastern side, yes, is Transnistria, which is kind of that breakaway region from Moldova. So obviously the southern side poses a risk here, because then you've got Romania right here too. So Moldova, I can't remember. I want to say, maybe they're not a NATO member. I might be wrong about that. I'll have to double check for you. But obviously, the closer they get this way, they could reach Romania, right? So then Romania is a NATO member, which could start World War III if they get involved here. So I think that's why Moldova is being watched right now too. These are the two weak points here, Moldova and then up here with Belarus. So he's talking about sending troops here, French troops, Macron is, to free up troops from this area, Ukrainian troops, and send them over to the eastern side where they're struggling to maintain their land and stay in this fight. So, yeah, I also saw a map too that there was some potential hotspots where French troops could actually already be right now. It was like an article that came out like a week ago, and there were several troop areas like down here by Moldova, and then lots of areas up here near the Belarusian border. So there's a possibility that Macron already has troops in Ukraine right now. Who knows? I mean, we do know that there's French mercenaries in Ukraine. They've been operating there for almost since the beginning of the war when it got started. But actual French troops on the ground is kind of an unknown right now for the most part. So yeah, very interesting news. I just wanted to share this with you because this is a big possibility, okay? They've been talking about sending a military contingent to Ukraine, and it's possible it could be announced out of nowhere, especially if Ukraine really starts to struggle here. And we do got some word that maybe in the next week or so, the next week or two, there's a possibility that Congress may put up that Ukraine bill and pass some funding for Ukraine. So we'll have to see how that goes. But aside from that, Ukraine's not really getting any funding right now. They are getting some support from Europe, but not nearly as much as the U.S. could be supporting them right now. So the longer that this money gets delayed to go to Ukraine, the higher the chances that France would want to send their troops to Ukraine, because they're going to be struggling more if they run out of ammunition and supplies of that sort. So let me know what you think down below. This is very interesting information. Share your comments and your thoughts, your concerns down below. And if you got something out of this video, please smash the like button. And also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below and hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, I hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. We'll see you in the next one.